As we move from the written word to the lived experiences of Goan communities, let's turn our attention to a fascinating historical project. Our next session, Soboicar, Konkani Catholics in Old Bombay, brings to light a lesser-known chapter in the intertwined histories of Goa and Mumbai. Independent journalist and author, oral historian Jane Borges, and archive director of the Citizens Archive of India, Malvika Bhatia, will present personal stories and historical insights from the Soboicar project, an oral history archive that documents the lives of Konkani Christian families who migrated from Goa's Konkan region to South Mumbai. Please welcome Jane and Malvika. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It's so nice to see such a big crowd here. As Asad said, I'm the archive director at the Citizens Archive of India. And instead of telling you about it to start with, I'm just going to show you a video about what we do and how we got involved with Soboicar. Can I have the Avid team please play the video?
They call them the good old days. Stories of lives lived, a time gone by.
During the 40s, there was a petrol rationing. So to go to school, we had to go in a ghoda gadi. And we had a very nice ghoda gadi. And we had the coachman, the driver of the ghoda gadi, all in a uniform and all like the Maharajas used to have. We had a very aristocratic life.
Stories of not just kings and queens, wars and battles, but of ordinary people who saw a nation being born.
बहुत बड़े हिंदू मुस्लिम दंगे हुए, लेकिन मार्च में जाकर के वो फिर जब ये बिल्कुल तय हो गया कि हिंदुस्तान पाकिस्तान बनेगा, ये मार्च में तय हो गया, तो इतना जबरदस्त दंगे हुए, हमको ये कल्पना भी नहीं थी कि हिंदुस्तान पाकिस्तान बनेगा तो ऐसा हो जाएगा कि उधर के अलग इधर के अलग। हमने कहा वो कहा कुछ राज्य इधर के उनके एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन उनका हो जाएगा, उनका डिवीजन का ये स्वरूप होगा, वो नहीं होगा।
Their joys and sorrows.
तो बोले भाई ने स्कूल भेजो, बोले 8 स्कूल भेजो, उसी स्कूल में बोले फलानी स्कूल, बोले इसी बोले छोरा छोरी से सागा पढ़ाया उठाइया हुआ पिया हुआ। मेरे पिताजी बेमी बहुत थे, गई किताब बस्ता कही, मेरे को स्कूल नहीं भेजी। मैं बहुत रोई, ऊपर आकर माँ के पास बहुत रोई, कोई उपाय नहीं।
Trials and tribulations.
यहाँ उन गांव में ना डाकू आते थे। डाकू पहले चिट्ठियाँ लिख देते थे, हम फलाने दिन आ रहे हैं, और जो अमीर घर होगा उसके घर में ही डाका डालेंगे। तो एक डाकू वहाँ का मशहूर था, तोरा डाकू। What he used to do, he used to go in the rich houses. तो वहाँ से ज्वेलरी पैसा जो मिलता था ले लेता था। तो वो इतने क्रूअल होते थे कि वो बालियाँ खींच के कान फट के वो लेके जाते थे। एंड दिस इज़ अ नोन फैक्ट, इट इज़ नॉट एग्जैजरेशन। तो फिर एक बार एक घर में गए, ये तोरा डाकू गया, तो जिस गांव का वो था उस गांव की लड़की थी, उसके घर में डाका डालने गया। तो उसने देखा, तो उसने तोरा, उसको पता है उसके गाँव का है लड़का, तो शी सेज अरे तोरे भाई भरा, पंजाबी में भरा बोलते हैं, तू आया कुछ चाय पिएगा, पानी पिएगा। जब उसने भाई क्या दिया तो वो चला गया वहाँ से, उसने डाका नहीं डाला। वो भी अपने असूल रखते थे, ये डाकू भी थे तो असूल तो होते थे उनके।
Millions of experiences, each one a part of India's story.
मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना के पास में ऑटोग्राफ लेने को गया एक दफे। मैं खादी पहनता था उस वक्त पर, तो मैं बड़ी मीटिंग थी, कम से कम 25-50 हज़ार आदमी मुस्लिम इकट्ठे हुए थे, वो प्रवचन कर रहे थे। तो मैंने ऑटोग्राफ मांगा, ये मुझे देखकर जिन्ना साहब ने बोला कि तुम खादी पहना तो गर्म हो गया, तो हमारे ऑटोग्राफ को फेंक दिए ऐसे, गेट आउट फ्रॉम हियर। तो हमें किताब लेके भागा। मेरे साथ 2 और भी फ्रेंड्स थे। पीछे सोचा कि दूसरे दिन उनके घर पे जावे, बहुत प्यार से बोले आओ बेटा आओ। पीछे उसने एप्पल मंगाया, काटा अपने हाथ से, सबको खिलाया, बहुत प्यार से दिया। मुझे पब्लिक में तो ऐसा होता है क्या?
They will soon be lost to us forever. The Citizens Archive of India wants to make sure that doesn't happen. We want to delve deeper than the history books into the lives of real people who have seen the nation become what it is today and want to share their story.
Our vision is to create a publicly accessible digital archive for scholars, students, and ordinary citizens who wish to listen to and learn from these stories. We want to take these stories into museums, into libraries, and into classrooms. We want to make sure that our future learns from our past. And most importantly, we want to show children that history is not just about dates and figures, but about real people with real stories. You can help us do this.
Thank you so much. There's a lot more to come. I'm going to be very brief before I hand this over to my colleague Jane. We started this archive just before India's 70th Independence Day because, as you saw, we're going to lose these stories. We're going to lose this generation. We've lost some of the people you saw in the video already. We collected hundreds of hours of these stories in almost 5,000 photographs, all in a digital form. We also realized that there are independent oral historians all over the country doing some brilliant work. And one of them, who I was very lucky to meet very early on in this journey, is my colleague Jane Borges, who I'm sure many of you know because she's also an author. And we partner with independent oral historians so that we can offer them our resources and archival support and mentorship. And we help them conduct their projects. So we like, when we identify a good project. And I'm super proud to have been working with Jane for the last 3 years. I'm going to hand it over to her now, and she's going to tell you about our amazing project, Soboicar.
Hello and good evening, and thank you so much for joining us here today. As you've seen, the Generation 1947 project really was the impetus for me and my colleague, art therapist and writer Sheena Maria Piedad, who couldn't join us here today, to start Soboicar. What is Soboicar? So Soboicar comes from the word Sobo, South Bombay, and Bomoikar, which a lot of Goans and Mangaloreans who lived in Bombay, they were referred to back home. Both Sheena and I come from neighborhoods which at one point were predominantly Goan. I live in Kavel, and Sheena's family has roots in Dabul. Over the last few years, and by the way, before I continue, Kavel and Dabul are not very far from Mumbai Opera House. But over the last many years, both of us, because we've engaged with our neighborhoods, realized that spaces like these are now disappearing from the city's consciousness. And one of the primary reasons for this is migration. A lot of Catholics and Konkan Catholics from these neighborhoods are now migrating abroad, precisely for the same reasons that their forefathers came to Bombay: better jobs, good education, a better life. But what it's done to these neighborhoods is that they are no longer uniquely Catholic. They're overrun by other communities. And while that is what migration does, we thought it was time to really document the stories of the people who inhabited these neighborhoods. And that's how Soboicar was born. Since our inception in 2021, we've done extensive interviews in person and online during COVID with anyone and everyone who has some connection to these neighborhoods. Either they've lived there or their families have lived there. And while we say Soboicar, we've really expanded the geography of our interviews. So we start from anyone from Kaf Parade to Mahim, even the central parts of Bombay, because this is where some of the Konkan Catholics really came and initially settled. We've also been, bringing together material memory that will help us create a visual portrait of the community. And material memory includes photographs, booklets, anything that we are given and offered by our interviewees. I want to keep this short because we have a presentation here, but we now are going to show you some personal sketches of people we've interviewed. And while doing these interviews and while seeing these images, we really got an insight into the economic, social, political, and artistic, and most importantly, cultural contribution of the community to Bombay. And most importantly, how the community informed Bombay and how Bombay informed the community. So we'll begin with our first slide. Well, this is music, and we all know the contribution of the Konkan Catholics to music. This is a picture of Mr. Joseph Simplicio D'Souza. He was a Dobitalau resident, and we got his story from his son, Albert D'Souza. Now, Albert told us that Joseph was born in Goa, but went to Calcutta, where he learnt music, and then came to Bombay to become a musician. Of course, the beginnings were hard, and he had to do a lot of odd jobs before he was finally employed by All India Radio. And this is a picture from All India Radio's newsletter, The Indian Listener. He was part of a 3-member band, and he used to play the cello. Later, he was seen by Goody Servai. He was part of their band, then joined the Bombay Chambers Orchestra. And at the peak of his career, he was an indispensable part of the Hindi film music industry. He arranged orchestras for all the music directors of the 50s and 60s, primarily Shankar Jaikishan, with whom he traveled extensively in India and abroad. Okay, we have an audio now, but before that, I'll give you a little bit of history behind this. This is from songwriter late Gerald Pereira. Gerald Pereira was a theatrist, a theater artist, songwriter, Marxist trade union leader, and also fought for the Goan freedom movement from Bombay. He resided in Baikala. We spoke to his daughter, Lara Pereira Naik, when we recently went to Goa. Now, this particular song was written for a theatre, but also as a dedication to JBX de Cruz, the former CPIM leader who fought for port and mining workers. He died during a lathi charge and didn't receive medical aid on time. And Gerald wrote this song for him. As you can see, it's a duet. It says Chedwa ani Chede, that is boy and girl. So it's sung between a boy and girl. And the song is De Cruz Morona, that is De Cruz lives on. And it's basically that. It talks about the life and legacy of De Cruz. Can we have the audio clip now, please?
My father was a trade union leader and a communist leader. So all his songs, they are a reflection of his ideology. Kitne jale gai, kitne godle gai, sang di cruz, koso melo. To morong na bay, to urong na bay, teka pulis animalo. Oh, goiche vauradi, goiche vauradi, goiche vauradi. Murgova dokat kotai chakri. Ani borun boti, ami kotke poti. Fokot mine lakpoti.
Yes. Okay, so this is late Gerald Pereira, whose song we just heard. Mr. Gerald Pereira, like I said, was a Baikala resident, and he fought for Goa's freedom movement from Bombay. He studied here at St. Xavier's and then later pursued law. At one point, he was editing the Goan Age, which really put a lot of pressure on the Indian government to look at the Goan cause. He was also a member of the Goan People's Party and edited several flyers related to the Goan freedom movement. When Goa got its liberation in 1961, Mr. Gerald Pereira decided that he wanted to go back to his home in Basco. He settled there 3-4 years later, but unfortunately passed away very early at the age of 46, leaving behind a very young family. This is actually a scene from the funeral procession in Basco. Lara Pereira Naik says that Vasco actually came to a standstill at that day, and this only once happened before when Chief Minister Dayanand Bandodkar of Goa passed away. The next picture also has his family in the vehicle. Gerald, as per his wishes, was cremated, and his daughter says that he was among the first Catholics from Vasco to be cremated and have his funeral in such a manner. Okay, this is a very interesting picture. We got this from legendary actor and theatrist Cyriaco Dias, whom I met in Kalangut recently. So I think many of you know about the opinion poll which happened in 1967 when Chief Minister Dayanand Bandodkar left it to the Goans to decide whether they wanted to merge with Maharashtra. And there were several such political and social movements that took place at that point, asking the Goans to go and vote against the merger. This one took place at Patkar Hall in Marine Lines, and we can see Dr. Simon Fernandez, who was a Dhobi Talao resident and the former editor of the Goa Times and a mayor. He's there in the picture, and we can also see Jack Sequeira with a long beard. He's known as the father of the opinion poll. But we see Cyriaco Dias here. He's sitting third from left, and he's not dressed as Cyriaco Dias, but a Goan Hindu. And he called himself Shambhu Kankonkar. Now, the reason is not because he was play acting or role playing, but because the license and permission for this meeting would have only been granted to them if they had representation of a Goan Hindu. Unfortunately, the Goan Hindu who was supposed to come, he fell ill at the last minute and he said, I cannot speak. And so Mr. Shambhu Kankonkar came and spoke to the people, and many of them actually recognized him and were amazed. They thought, okay, he's acting, he's doing what he does on the stage all the time. On the right, you can see the Hindu person who was supposed to speak, but he came anyway because he just wanted to express his solidarity. Mr. Cyriaco Dias actually gave me a few lines from that speech when he still remembers it, and he spoke to the people about Tamre Mati, which is red soil. He said, you know, we've played on this red soil, we've eaten on this red from this red soil, and we should reclaim this soil. Of course, Goa was never merged with Maharashtra, the best thing to have happened. Okay, this is a picture contribution from the world of sports, hockey. I'm very proud to say she's my aunt. This is Vivian Godet, a former resident of Cavell, and this is a picture taken while they were playing in Osaka, Japan. Vivian shared with us a very interesting story. She says that in 1968, when she was selected to play for India, she found out she was pregnant, but she decided she didn't want to talk about it to any of the players. She underwent the rigorous coaching, the exercises, played the entire tournament while being 3 months pregnant. And it was only later that she told her team players and coach. So now, while we're talking about Serena Williams winning the Grand Slam while pregnant, I think one of our Indian sports persons had done it long ago. Okay. Education, of course, we know of the contribution in the field of education, but we got some lovely pictures from outside the classroom. And these are 2 sports day events that have taken place 40 years apart. One is of Linda and Bertha Pereira. Now, Bertha is my colleague, Sheena Maria Piedad's grandmother. And she was a teacher at Barreto High School. And this was taken at Brabant Stadium in Churchgate. And the next picture is of Genevieve D'Souza. This is just before her retirement. She was teaching at St. Sebastian Goan High School. Genevieve practically taught at almost all schools in South Mumbai before she was permanently hired at St. Sebastian. This is also just before her retirement. What is interesting, and I found that interesting, is how the dressing sense has really changed. You know, in the 1950s, you see Goan women in these fashionable dresses, and by the 1990s, they've really embraced the salwar kameez. So I found that very interesting. We have a video now, but again, a short background. This is former Air India Managing Director, Mr. Michael Mascarenhas, who is credited with spearheading what we now remember as the largest airlift in the aviation history, which took place during the Gulf War. Mr. Mascarenhas' life story partly inspired the Bollywood film Airlift, starring Akshay Kumar. And he's also the uncle of Mr. Vivek Menezes, who has, helped put together the event. We'll now get you to listen to this short video clip where Michael Mascarenhas talks about that time from the airlift. Can you please play the video?
I covered 32 countries from Oman to Cyprus, little realizing that within a few months, Mr. Saddam Hussein would decide to invade Kuwait. And he did that on the 1st of August 1990. I was sleeping in my flat in Dubai, phone ringing insistently. Finally, groggily, I picked up the phone with the manager in Kuwait. He was in a panic. There's an invasion. I thought he was nuts. This is about 3 o'clock in the morning. Then it dawned on me. First thing in the morning, 7 o'clock, I called up Bombay. I said, listen, this is what's happened. They've taken over Kuwait. Obviously, they've taken over our office. I said, taken over everything. What do we do? I personally think that we should wait for 24, 36, 48 hours. By that time, Saddam Hussein realized Kuwait doesn't grow any of his food. had limitations on water distillation plants, that those who were unwanted, those who wanted to leave, had to get them out fast. Less liability, which people didn't know at that time. In the meantime, the Indian community, 171,000 at that time, was getting more and more nervous, more and more restless because they're running out of food, running out of water. So gradually they started trickling out of Kuwait, via Basra, via Amman, into other parts of Jordan. Then they started gravitating towards Amman because they hoped that some sort of an airlift will be organized. Still hope. By that time, I told Bombay, listen, I better go to Amman. We had no office, we had no general sales agent, we had nobody there. So hastily I grounded up my troops manager from Bahrain, somebody else from somewhere else, and we rushed into Amman. And that was the start of the Amman airlift, the largest airlift in the history of civil aviation. It was 116,000 people moved in 59 days on 451 flights. I know the numbers by heart because I was on the runway in Amman for 59 days, 2 months.
Okay, we have the next set of slides, and these are all slice of life stories. This is from my neighborhood, Kavel, and this used to take place traditionally on the 26th. This used to take place on 26th December and on Boxing Day. You can see everyone's gathered and it's a huge and massive crowd. This is not something we see anymore. The last time I did this particular dance, which is called the barn dance, it was in 2010. And that's when I remember seeing a bonfire, which also had happened after many years. So yes. Another interesting picture from a rose ceremony of Hazel Martins, who married renowned psychiatrist Dr. Charles Pinto. And this is taken at the BIT Chawl in Agripada. You have all the neighbors coming together to scrape and grind coconuts for her rose ceremony. And you can just see the camaraderie and the community life in the Chawl back then. These are a lovely set of images from photo studios, things that we do not do anymore. But back then when there were no cameras, people used to go to photo studios to take their images. You can see the dress, very Victorian. And the names of photo studios right below, S. Hormuzji, P. Vusino, P. Gomes. I don't think these studios don't exist anymore. The only one here is Indian Art Studio in Kalba Devi. Again, lovely picnic images, which we've taken from 50 years apart. The first one is from the 30s, and it has Vivian De Silva and friends from Cavell. The second one is taken at Mud Island, teachers from Barreto High School, Bertha Pereira and colleagues at Mud Island. And the last image is of Albert D'Souza and friends from Mahindra and Mahindra at Manori. Interestingly, one of the interviewees told us that back then in the 1930s and 40s, when people wanted to go for a picnic, they took long drives to Dadar. And that was their idea of a picnic. And there were gardens, apparently. I don't think that is what you get to see in Dadar today for sure. But yes. Okay, this is from a personal collection. This is my grandfather's pocket book of cutting. My grandfather was a tailor. He came to Bombay in the 1940s to become a tailor and at some point moved to Oman, I think in the 1970s. But when I recently discovered this book, I saw that on the first page, my grandfather had written his name and an address, Bahrain address and a telephone and PO box number. Now, none of us in the family knew that he had made a pit stop to Bahrain, but this is how material memory sometimes opens up to us. They tell us stories that we probably never knew. Okay, the last set of images are from weddings. We have the wedding of Dr. Charles Pinto with Hazel Martins at St. Ignatius Church in Jacob Circle. Then we have another picture of Mr. Jerome Lewis and his wife, Renee, at a reception in Bandra where they're doing the wedding march. And the last and my favorite image is of Genevieve D'Souza with her husband, John Felix D'Souza. If you read the name of the hall, it says Instituto Luso Indiano Hall. Now, Genevieve and John got married just before the liberation movement, so I think the buildings and institutes were still associated with the Portuguese. Today, of course, it is called the Goan Institute building, and it is still used by residents of Dabul to have celebrations. My parents had their silver wedding anniversary. With this, really, we come to a wrap with our presentation. But because, I had Genvi on the last slide here, I also wanted to say Genvi is in our audience today. She is also our oldest interviewee at 90. We interviewed her earlier this year. And I must say, she was our most enthusiastic interviewee. She shared with us all the stories that she could as a teacher, both in Goa and Bombay, her life experiences. At 90, she still engages with the church and community. It is just very, very inspiring. And we're also very inspired by all the other stories of interviewees, and we're grateful to them. Some months ago, Genvi had, ran into me near the church and asked me, Jane, how can I see this archive come alive? While what we do is purely meant for research and scholarship, we are grateful and thankful to Avid, Asad, and Vivek Menezes for giving us this platform to show, Genvi and other interviewees and everyone else what we are trying to do with this archive and the stories that we are trying to build. Like I say, migration is something that we cannot control and cannot be checked. But migration is also the story about lives of people on the move. And with Soboicar, we're trying to capture that journey. So thank you again. I know there are some people in the audience who would be perfect subjects for this project. We are also in the audience today. If you want to reach out to us, please feel free. We can also be reached at dearsoboicar@gmail.com and our Instagram handles, both personal as well as Soboicar and Citizens Archive of India. So thank you so much.